Up Bookworms. This is Megan coming at you with another Cantina conversation. Today's episode features a chat with David Weill. We're talking about his book, All That Really Matters. That book is available now. Such a fun conversation. I really loved this book, and I appreciated David's time and energy into this conversation. This is a medical fiction book, contemporary fiction book, and his character story is based on his own experiences in the medical field. So I really appreciated getting to know his experiences and how they transferred over to his writing ideas and all that good stuff. But without further ado, here is David. So today we've got David Weill. We are talking about his book, All That Really Matters. That book is available now. David, thank you for joining me today. This book is fresh in my brain. I just finished it. I really enjoyed it. I wasn't sure what to expect because I guess it's, I don't know, like a contemporary, like very character driven, but I really enjoyed it. I loved getting to know Joe and hot mess, multi-dimensional character that he was. And so we're gonna get into it. I'm excited to get into it today.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So before we get started, can you share like a summary of the book so that people can?
Protagonist is a heart transplant surgeon named Dr. Joe Bosco, and Joe's got a lot of good attributes. He has a steep rise in his career and then an equally steep decline. He gets himself into a bit of trouble and then spends the second half of the book trying to get himself out of it. There's a love interest in the story named Kate, who also plays a big role in the book, and also Joe's father, who has very high expectations of him. A lot of characters. I'm a transplant doctor, so a lot of people that I worked with inspired many of the candidates, the characters rather, and I hope they came to life on the page.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I read like a little bit of your background and I was like, "Oh, no wonder so many of these details sounded so authentic and flowy and you knew what you were talking about and you were able, yeah, absolutely, you're able to bring not just the characters but just the situations like with all that medical terminology, it's complicated and there's a lot going on and you did it very well. Like hopping off of that, can you like go over your background and because this is your debut, right?
Yeah, it's my debut novel. I wrote a memoir actually that was published in
Okay.
2021, and
Okay.
the memoir called Exhale was about the ups and downs of doing my kind of work, which was lung transplant work. And I spent most of my career at Stanford in California, where I headed up the lung transplant program. And the memoir was about patient stories, the courage they showed, their resiliency, the emotional toll it took on me and my team. And then I decided that I didn't go quite as far as I wanted to due to various
Mm,
sensitivities when you're writing nonfiction,
sure.
but both patient confidentiality issues and also the institution where I worked. I didn't want to expose all the good and the bad. And so I decided to write a novel where I felt like I could get into big healthcare issues with more freedom.
Yeah, and it's nobody's gonna get on you about it because it's fiction,
Right.
right?
That's right.
So
That's
you had a
right.
little more freedom. Oh, that's so much fun. How was your experience switching gears, not switching professions, but switching from working as a healthcare provider versus then like getting into the creative or writing a novel project and then but also big lessons learned from the whole process, even if just from switching from a memoir to fiction, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it was a process. I mean, I certainly think that the writing that I've done, both in long form, like the two books I've written, and shorter forms, I write some op-eds as well for various outlets.
Mm,
I think that it helps me crystallize my own thoughts about what happened during the course of my career, what I think is going to happen in the future with healthcare. But more than that, I walked around the hospital for all those years, and a lot of
mhm.
times I was by myself, and I swear I turned around a lot of times and said, is anybody catching this or is this just me?
Yeah,
Because you see some incredible stuff. Patients at their absolute best and their worst when they're the most
yeah,
vulnerable. And then you see the team members that I'm interested in writing about at their best and their worst. Many of these folks that work in the field are highly dedicated, highly driven to do a good job. But as you might
yeah.
imagine, sometimes aren't a day at the beach. And I wanted to show all of that in both the books that I've written, one in a fiction form and one in a nonfiction form.
Yeah, that's such a layered concept because just being in healthcare in general on both sides of it as the provider and as a patient, like you see people at their worst. It's not just the physical, it's the emotional, the mental. Like they're faced with their mortality and you never know how someone's going to react and how to deliver that information or how to handle it because I imagine it's not just like a couple visits, it's like over a spans of time. A person on day 1 versus a person on day 90 or day 120 is gonna be very different interactions even though it's the same person. It's 'cause you get to know your patients and you're seeing them as they're dealing with these issues, and also there's so much pressure on you and your colleagues to, like that's why I appreciated when you did with, Joe's character because he's nobody wants a down in the dumps, a negative Nancy doctor. They want a positive, optimistic attitude. And it's those little things, those little details like that just reminded me that, yeah, there's so much pressure and it's so much. And Joe, he was just like really, he was arrogant, but then he was also like, why is nobody up to speed? Like, why the second that something wasn't flowing, it was like like something switched where he got so irritable because it was like that affects his job. And he expected the same performance from everybody around him. So I imagine when you were talking about your colleagues, the people that when you worked in the industry in your position, a lot of people inspired that. I imagine to be a fly on the wall in some of those situations, like the drama in retrospect, for me, outside the picture, I'm like, yeah, like drama. Ooh, I want to see people getting their feathers ruffled. But in a situation like this, no, this is like someone's life, this is someone's health. This is the patient is there like at the mercy of you and your team. And it's just so many layers of that. And I can't imagine like how how you put that into the page and how you like created this story based off of one person and just trying to put it all together and also convey the stress and the tension and the stakes and poor Joe. He was such a complicated character and but through him we get like the insight of that real pressure and the real stress and the real like what 12-hour shifts, what you guys have to do like day to day. And I can't imagine. You feel free to talk about to share any of your experience as much as you want. There's a reason I didn't go into surgery as my profession because I'm like, that's too much pressure. You got to remember everything like on the fly. There's certain professions where you have to retain information ready to go.
It's a big part of it. I thought a lot about my career as I was writing both books, really. And I think there's a physical component to it. We were up a 12-hour shift would be a blessing. It was never
Mm,
a 12-hour shift,
mm.
24, 36, 48, 72.
God.
And so that's the physical part. And to be honest with you, I thought the physical part of the job was the easiest part. The emotional part, getting close to your patients, getting close to your patients' families, knowing the name of their dog, their favorite food, everything about them, and then losing one of those patients was extraordinarily difficult. And I think also the responsibility part of it. I walked around for 25 years with a list of names in my pocket that I had to get transplanted, and but it impacted me. It impacted
Yeah.
the way I thought about my job, the way I interacted with other people, the way I looked at myself, all of this, because that responsibility was heavy.
Yeah. So I can imagine doing the memoir and this one was a little bit of therapeutic, like you're able to reflect or put it out there
Yeah,
and
definitely.
in your own way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And I think that's a great part about writing. That's why I've enjoyed it so much. And working on the third book right now is
Nice.
I think it does allow this kind of reflection. A lot happened to me over the course of 25 years that I didn't have time to really process and work on and all of that. I was blowing and going at thousands of miles an hour. But this is really nice because now I can slow down and really think about what happened and try to
Yeah.
get it on the page. And you were talking earlier about a fly on the wall. That was the main reason I wanted to write the book is I wanted people to know what this is like and to feel it. The books that I enjoy the most are the ones where I can say I'm in it with this character and I know what it's
Mhm.
like to be whatever the book is about. And I thought
Joe
that,
as a character, even though
yeah,
he was, I don't
kind of
know,
kind
like,
of
you
rough.
even though it was still like, but that's what makes him entertaining and engaging as the characters. He's like, a little bit exciting. It's just he's rough a little bit, and he like is a jokester, and people get frustrated with him because he's a jokester. And poor, what was her name, Mary? He's got people around him that know him and know how he is and know how to gear him towards to get more focused and to go easy on the other people in the team. And yeah, but then it was just like at first with the character or the reader is getting to know the character. I'm sure that obviously this is probably intentional, but you're getting to know him. You're like, yeah, okay, he's a hot shot. But then we get like little flashbacks of his childhood, and he's had like pressure from the beginning. Like he's had big shoes to fill, big expectations of him, and that propelled him to where he is. And he's like great in his field. He's known, but he's also got the respect for people in his field too. So it's not without he's acknowledging it, but then he's also, no, I'm acknowledging myself too, but he's just handling it, working with others very nicely, I guess you could say. But then once we see his really rapid downfall, it's like when the night in question is happening, we're just seeing it. We're like, oh, dude.
Yeah,
We're like, pay attention to those text messages. Like, you got to
yeah,
pay attention. And it's
yeah.
just, yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah, without giving too much away, he was gonna head to a crisis. The way he was going and the way he was behaving and his arrogance and everything else, he was headed to a crisis. But guess what? That's what happens in real life, right? And I wanted to make it true to life because this is what happens. And I think also the book is really about expectations. He had very high expectations put on him by his parents, but also he had high expectations of himself. And some of the most complex characters in real life are those that
Yeah.
have very high expectations.
Yeah.
It seems like, at least my observations, have
Yeah,
been
you like you said,
lower.
like over
Yeah,
what like your 25-year career of
yeah,
getting to know the basic level of like humanity, like the very vulnerable situation, the very vulnerable of people where they're like faced with their mortality, they're faced with their weaknesses that they can't do much about it at that time. So I'm gonna bounce around a bit. So in the healthcare industry, I have two little boys, so I've been through labor and delivery and all that. I have parents who are retired. They've had their own medical issues. My dad fractured his skull a couple times, and that was really scary. And then also it's for other reasons. It's so my experience of I'm on that patient side, but then I'm also like I'm grateful that I've had such like a limited experience with it because I'm like I'm not one of those people who are like I have to like at least now like I'm not even 40 yet. So I imagine maybe hope universe willing in 20, 30 years if I'm still like I'm good, I imagine my health will reflect that, but I'm saying like it in that time it's like you're seeing people who are they're reflecting on their past decisions. They're reflecting on their habits. They're like, "Oh, what should I have done differently? I can't believe this is happening to me," kind of thing. And sometimes it's just bad luck. Right? It's like it
yeah,
could be
yeah,
genetics, it could be your own actions, but sometimes it's just like your body has this little thing that something will trigger it, and then you've got a bigger problem on your hands. And
sure.
yeah, and so and then I have some I have a couple really close friends who work in the hospital setting, and I see the toll that it takes on them when they're in that position that Joe is, where they put the pressure on themselves, and then when they can't they have to do something and then it doesn't work, and it's just like it's heavy, just heavy if not for you guys too, because they're one case in your rotation, right? You got to go deliver some bad news to a family, but then you got to get back to it on your next shift and do another case. Like you got to
Yeah,
pick yourself up somehow.
yeah,
And
it's very much that kind of career where you compartmentalize all the time. You do it several times a day, and it's very much like that. And I think one of the benefits of being able to look back on all of this is now I get to think through all of it. Whereas when I was going from patient to patient, it was a little more difficult because I didn't have the luxury of,
you just had to like I don't know, just take one step at a time or go through the motions, or maybe you found that formula of getting in the zone and putting on that face and getting into it. I don't know, that's just like such a big deal and such a it's a lot. It's like thinking because that's like what I said, this book, your book is I was trying to get it in the frame here. 'Cause I was happy enough to get a hard copy. But I was just thinking, God, to be that person, to be in that profession, but then I've only seen like a snippet of it. I haven't been like a super medically dependent person. I don't know a whole lot of people who are like that, but it's just I'm just one person. I'm just one person in my little bubble. And it's just it was crazy. I appreciated that through Joe and through Joe's story and through his journey. I'm glad that you glad and appreciative that you were able to like illustrate that and get into the emotion of that and get to the seriousness of that, and but also make him an interesting character. He was very entertaining. I don't he was like a smart ass, and he would say things like, dude, read the room, even though it was like I can see how that type of stuff, like that attitude, could be needed sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, and
To
hospitals are
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
All kind of things get said. Humor is used to deflect from feeling the real emotion of it. It's high tension, so people fight with each other. Hospitals are interesting playpens. They've got
Yeah.
there's a lot there.
It's just yeah, because it's I imagine with any workplace, it's like a lot of different personalities working on the same thing, but
Mhm.
there's different levels of intensity, different levels of stress, and I have a whole lot of respect, even if you're working as like a clerk in in a hospital setting, you're just doing billing or coding or whatever. I have respect for anybody who's got to be in that setting because it's you can feel it. You can feel the tension. You can feel the environment. Like I work in marketing. I do technically work in the healthcare industry. I do like marketing for orthopedic software, and before that, I did it for coding and billing and stuff like that as a marketing for software that did that. So it's like I'm aware of the complications of it, but it's like to be the face of it, to deal with these people. That's just I don't know. I'm gonna ramble on, but I can imagine. I don't want to imply that Joe is you or like you put yourself in Joe, but I'm like, okay, how could you not?
Yeah, I
How
think
was your journey? Did your journey compare to his?
in some ways yes, and in some ways no. I think Joe and all the characters really were combinations of people that I worked with. They're not made up out of thin air. No, it's not science fiction; it's fiction. And I think the field attracts interesting people, and it's the ultimate team sport. So there's all kind of team members. You mentioned Mary; she was the head nurse for the transplant team. She was Joe's work wife, if you will. I met a lot of people just like her. I worked with a lot of people just like her. Good people, really good people. And so I think you have to enjoy a team environment if you're going to do this kind of work, which I very much did. But the personalities that are attracted to this kind of field to do transplant are unique, and I wanted to show that it's an area of medicine that it definitely attracts a certain type of personality.
That's yeah. I can't imagine. I imagine also like you guys are all as just as qualified. I guess the only thing that's really separating you is years in the field amongst your colleagues. It's you're just as qualified, you're just as knowledgeable as the next person with your title. And I can imagine how so many of those people like butt heads, and that can just make everything like
Yeah,
worse. And
definitely. I see this in the work I
yeah,
do now. I consult with various transplant programs across the country, and
okay,
I'm more coach than quarterback these days. And
okay,
in consulting with these teams that have dysfunction and they argue with each other, and it's a lot of big egos that happen in real life, but they also make interesting characters for novels. So I think it's all true to life.
yeah. I no 100%. You touch on, I imagine this is what you've also witnessed as well. To label it content warnings, content trigger warnings of family relationships, like
Yeah.
father-son relationships, and like alcoholism, substance abuse, like corruption, like self-destruction. Like
Yeah, all the
how
above.
yeah, how did you navigate? And I just want to explore your process of like how you navigated through some of those like tricky topics and just doing with respect to it. Did you have to do any like additional research other than what's already in your brain and stuff like that?
Yeah, a lot of it I already had just because I'd either seen it in the hospital setting, or I'd seen
Yeah,
it now in my role as a consultant, or I had friends that went through something similar, not in medicine, in some other field. And so I didn't
sure.
have to do a lot of research. There was a couple small points that I had to think about and talk to some people about. But most of it I had already. It was not a research heavy kind of book because I lived this life for so long. I didn't have to really explore too much.
Yeah, because I without airing out so much of the spilling throwing too much shade on any of your previous colleagues' experiences, but I imagine that's common in the field of coping mechanisms
Sure,
and,
and yeah, and coping is the right word for it because I think in our field you saw all kinds of different folks deal with the stress in different ways, exercise a lot, which I tended to do to an absurd degree. And then there were other people that had substance abuse issues, drug and alcohol problems.
yeah.
There were people that had extramarital affairs. There were all kinds of different things. I think that would be common in any walk of life where you're having a high stress situation. People have good ways of dealing with it and they have bad ways of dealing with it. And
Yeah,
I think
it's
that's common.
messy versus healthy, I guess is
Yep.
a
Yep.
yeah. Is
Yep.
a good way. I don't know. That's partially where my I don't know what's the term for it. Schadenfreude. It's an old term where it's you kind of you get a little bit of glee in witnessing other people's like demise, and I'm sorry that maybe that's why I like to read so much. I'm like, yes, ruffle the feathers. I like to see a hot mess. I like to see you throw your characters into
Definitely.
situations where they have to deal with shit. But it's real life, yeah.
Yeah. And that's why people read memoir because they want to put themselves in other people's shoes and they read novels that have characters like this. It doesn't surprise me, really. I enjoy
Yeah.
reading those same kind of things. Yeah.
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 Yeah, or it's a way to, like, relate on any level. It's okay, I'm not this person, but I understand
Yeah.
what they're going through and how
Definitely.
they're yeah, you know what I mean? It's I understand what they're going through or how they're feeling, and they're just, like, being really messy about it. It's absolutely 100%. Okay, I'm gonna throw this at you. It's a two-parter. What were the most challenging parts to write? What were the most enjoyable parts to write?
The most challenging part, there wasn't like a, I'll say it this way. I had three different endings to the book. The third ending is the one that you read. So there were two others that I didn't end up being happy with. I think it's everybody talks about how you start a book is important, and I think I had that. I didn't struggle with the story itself as it unfolded, but to land the plane at the end, figuratively, not literally, was I struggled with a little bit because there were so many ways that this story could have ended. I wrote two others that didn't see the light of day, and then I wrote this third one that I ended up being happy with. I
What
suspect,
can you share any big differences? What made the other maybe you don't have to spoil it, but what made the other
yeah,
one maybe not work so much?
I think it was the issue of is it, first is could this have happened? Is it true to life? Is it believable? And then secondly, is it satisfying to the reader
Okay.
to end
Yeah.
my first ending probably hit number one, true to life, could have happened that way, not going to be emotionally satisfying to the reader. I
Okay.
personally liked it. That's why I wrote it. I decided then to take a second stab at it, and I neither thought it was true to life nor did I find it emotionally satisfying. And then I got to my third one, but that was months and months of work trying
Yeah.
to end the story in a way that I thought did justice to the rest of it because I was pretty happy with how I started it, how I started the book. I think it was understandable, and I think it hopefully allowed the reader to quickly get into the story. They didn't have to, read 100 pages to figure out
Yeah.
what was even going on.
Yeah, I can't remember how you started it because I
Yeah,
seriously read it in 2 days, so it's
yeah,
only like 300 pages. I think that's like a decent sized book.
yeah.
It's like average, maybe, not like
Hmm.
you're not like writing an epic saga.
No, and
Um,
I don't love reading terribly long books. This book was 100,000 words and 348 pages. I think it was right sized. There's so much emphasis on how you start a book, and I read and talk with my publisher and my editor so much about how to start the books that I write that I felt happy with that, and I got that pretty quickly. Whereas the ending, not so much.
no, hey man, that was your challenge and you did it, and now I bet you could feel like you could take on anything to encourage you. I'm just like, "No, you did it. Like, you did it." I was satisfied, and I felt like the ending was believable, and it was just like you tugged at the heartstrings, obviously, throughout the story, but towards the end, like, the last, I don't know, 60 pages, I was just like I just, like, got through it, and it was just because like, it comes around full circle. Like, he's finishing his journey, and
Yeah.
he's
You've been
finishing his
through
growth.
Yeah, you've
Yeah.
been through a lot with this guy, and yeah, he was arrogant, but toward the end of the book, I think most people were trying to pull for him to get his act together.
You humbled the
Yeah,
shit out of him.
yeah, I tried to. But you asked about what I enjoyed writing. There was really two female characters in the book that I really enjoyed writing, and I really enjoyed writing dialogue for them. One was, and I won't spoil the story, but one was named Allie, who he met along the way in his journey. I really liked her as a character, and I liked writing her. There was another reporter that he wrote for the New York that he met
Mhm.
for the New York Times. Again, not giving the story away. And I liked writing her character, her dialogue, because I think she and Joe were both very bright people. They snapped at each other a little bit. They had good dialogue. It moved along pretty quickly. And she was a reporter, and I think reporters are interesting people anyway because they're very good
They
at
are.
asking questions.
Yeah. They're
And
cutting
she,
through the bullshit, and
yes,
they're like and she even called him out on it. She's like,
yeah,
"Dude."
yeah, and reporters have heard it all before. They've heard people try to
Mhm.
dance, and
Mhm.
she wouldn't let them dance around too much. And her name was,
Divine.
yeah, Maggie Devine, and I liked her character a lot.
I liked her too, and I liked how you yeah, I think she was even though she played not a large role, large enough, she still made, like, a good impact. She was still, like, because then we saw the result of those interactions,
Yeah,
and it was like, I don't know, I guess you at least when I read characters who are reporters, it's the reader already has an expectation and maybe like a certain level of respect. And so it's okay, how this is going to play out with our main guy and with our smartass, with our jokester, with our guy who's been at the top of his field and then he had just made a horrible mistake and because he he had a night of not great decisions, great decision making, and then it's now he's aware of it, but then he was open. He was like, "Yeah, okay, let's get down to it. Fine, you, yeah,
yeah, that's
yeah,
how I felt. And I think a lot of times, isn't it interesting that you could write characters that are main characters, quote unquote, and they're all the way through the story. And then some people really remember a much smaller character. That's just how it is. It's interesting.
yeah." Obviously, Mary, I loved, and I loved like one of the last conversations they had. I won't spoil it, but I know that in case I like want to showcase it because it was like, it was so cute where she was revealing something to him,
Yeah,
and he was just like,
yeah,
"So what?"
yeah, yeah,
He's like, "Me too."
yeah, yeah. I know exactly. I remember writing
Yeah.
it, and yeah, I thought that was an interesting scene. I know exactly which one you're talking
I just remember, yeah, because when if you're Joe's a reader, do you read books then? Are you a bookworm?
about. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That's one thing that we do share in common. I love to read. I really do.
Yeah. Yeah, what do you tend to like, what do you gear what genre do you, find yourself drawn to?
I like memoir quite a bit. It's the voyeuristic kind of part of me. But I would say the fiction nonfiction split is about 50-50 for me. And I suspect, God willing, that my future writing is going to be 50-50.
Okay.
I think. So I tend to read a good bit of memoir on the nonfiction side, and then fiction is all over the place. It's popular fiction,
Fantasy, sci-fi, contemporary, all of it, whatever.
all the above, all the above.
Yeah.
I like fiction a lot, and I'll go back to it. I'm writing a nonfiction book right now, but I'll go back to fiction for sure.
There's something, like, freeing and
Yeah, it's nice.
relatable, and you get to explore so many things, and I say this a lot, but it's like there's so many stories to tell, and there's so many ways to tell them, and it's just the sky's the limit, and it's just
Yeah,
a matter of it well, and
That's the
connecting to
trick.
people.
That's the trick.
It really is, like, when it gets down to it, it's that's why, like, I when I do these things, I don't discriminate against indie published authors because I'm
Right.
like, I've read independent published authors that I've really enjoyed the work. So I'm like,
Sure.
"No, like, it's whatever, like, if you wanna chat, let's chat, and I will help you reach more people." But, okay, so if you're looking for a memoir, I'll recommend so I actually interviewed, Adam Nimoy, Leonard Nimoy's son. He wrote talking about his memoir about his relationship with his father and how his kind of like overall short summary of it would be like he was Leonard Nimoy's son and it was all about his career. And so being his son, he was like desiring he was wanting that father son relationship, but then he got it like too little too late, but he was still appreciative of it. But then he explores like because he his addiction against his father's alcoholism and then like how that transfers to him being a father to his own kids.
Yeah.
So it's like that was also like part of what clued me in about where you included Joe's relationship with his dad and how like complicated and crazy that could be. What advice do you have for Joe?
What um, don't have such high expectations of yourself. Temper your expectations, you'll be happier
Yes, I think that could be arguably good advice for a lot of people, real and fictional.
too.
You're probably a rock star in your own field, and now you're, like, writing amazing fiction and nonfiction, I assume, so you gotta stay humble. You gotta stay
Yeah,
humble.
try
Imagine do
to.
you
I have a
'cause
lot of people around me help me.
I was gonna say, like, do you who's your beta readers? Like, your wife and your yeah?
Yeah, I have two daughters. They like to read my early stuff, and then I've actually got a handful. My wife does too, and then I've got a handful of friends, equal split, male and female, because I want both
Oh,
perspectives.
that's yeah, good.
Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
important because I think men and women are different readers.
Yeah.
So I have a handful of people that have read actually both books in early form and have made really meaningful insights, really smart people that have made meaningful
That's
insights.
awesome.
And they help the work and I try to acknowledge
Yeah.
them. Yeah,
Yeah, different points of view, obviously more eyes on your work that
yeah,
because you've been staring at your baby for like however
yeah.
many months and then it's no, I need fresh eyes on this. And then, yeah, it's no, that's perfect. But I was a beta reader for one of my friends who she was self-published, and I was like I just remember having, like, notes that weren't just, like, grammar or spelling. I was just like but she knows that I read so much, so she was like, "No, thank you." It was just what I see and what I like, and I know that I'm not, like, the, authority, like, every different strokes for different folks type of thing, but it was just in general, I was like, "What about this? What about that?" This wasn't and then the authors I speak to, one in particular, like, his wife would beta read, and she'd be like, "A woman would never do that. Take that out." So
That's important.
helpful. Yeah,
Yeah, it is
yeah,
important. It is important. And I find that difficult. I can't get inside the head of a woman always, and I'm sure women have trouble getting inside of our head
yeah.
too. And especially this book has a lot of female characters, and I wanted to be sure I was true to that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It was yeah, either both platonic and romantic
Yes,
interactions.
yes,
Yeah, it was yeah. I really enjoyed all the female characters that you put in there because it was, like, different levels of interaction and relationships with him, and that
yeah,
was it was really good. It was, like, really awesome to see that he wasn't just some womanizer looking at women for physical or what, like, the
yeah,
potential interactions and, relationships he could have with them. Because with Mary, I think that was such an important character, like, aside from just how awesome she is, but also to show that he is capable of that. Like, he's
yeah.
capable of respecting and having a relationship and a friendship with a woman who's not a romantic pursuit.
Definitely, that was important to me to do.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciated that for sure. Okay, last question. What is you mentioned another book that you're working on, or can you talk about it? What's going
Yeah.
on that you can talk about?
Yeah, I'm knee deep in it right now. My publisher amazingly wants it by January 1st, which seems impossible, but nonetheless, I'm writing a book about religious identity, something I've
Okay.
actually struggled with and talked about a lot. It fits into my work in the hospitals because there was a religious component, believe it or not, to the kind of work I did. It was very spiritual in a lot of ways. But about identity broadly. How do we view ourselves? How do we identify? But it's gonna focus a lot on religious identity, something that I'm interested in,
It's really interesting.
and then
Like
my
from
pro
the medical perspective, I'm guessing.
really this one is not going to have a heavy medical bent to it. It'll have
Okay.
some, but not heavy. And then my publishers asked me to write a sequel to the novel that you were
Oh,
talking about today, which I have.
so what are you gonna
I don't
story
know.
go from
I
here?
have no idea. I've really got to finish this other one. But
You tell Mary's story. I'll
yeah,
just throw that out there. Maybe you
okay.
explore your other characters. Like,
No, it'd be great because I think there's a lot there. That's a good idea.
hey,
I
that's a freebie. That's
no,
just
I'm gonna need all the help I can get
yeah.
if I chose to
That
that.
hey, that's a good sign that they want more. They that world that more
Yeah,
Joe maybe. Joe can make an appearance and being like, "Mary, what are you doing?" Like
right. No, I'm not sure about that, but it's a possibility. But that's for four. I gotta finish
yeah, yeah.
this book number 3 right now. So
Hey, cross that bridge when you come to it.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. All right, David Weil, where can we find you online and on social media?
I'm easy to find. David Weill, David Weill.com has all things that I'm up to. It has the articles I write, the books, what I do in my consulting practice, all over social media at David Weill MD. Easy to find.
Perfect. Are you on Instagram or
I
like
am. Yeah.
Facebook or stuff like that? Okay. I
All
think I did find you. If your book club followed you, that's me. Um,
yeah, I figured as much.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would have trouble finding me. So
Perfect, perfect. Okay, so All That Really Matters, that book is available now. David, thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks for all of like your insight and your authentic answers and your generosity. And I would recommend this as like contemporary piece, like a character-driven story. I definitely recommend it because I, it was, for lack of better words, it was very easy to flip through. I was following the story. I wanted to keep going. I did not want to be disturbed from following Joe's journey, and I feel like that's like a good testament to it's a good book.
I
So
have I
I
right above
recommend
my.
it.
I'll leave you with this. Right above my writing space, I have a quote by Nathaniel Hawthorne that said, "Easy reading is damn hard writing."
It is. I love that. I love that. Nathaniel Hawthorne. But yeah, thank you so much. And then if and when you get any more books out, feel free to come back. I'd love to chat
I
again.
will. Thank you so much for your time.
And there you go. That was David Weil talking about his book, All That Really Matters. That book is available now. Check out the show notes where you can find links to purchase the book and where to find David online and on social media. Please also find Cantina Book Club online and on social media. Keep track of cantinabookclub.com and subscribe on YouTube where you can keep track of latest interviews and book reviews. And just whenever you're needing a book recommendation, you can always turn to Cantina Book Club website or follow on social media where you get those updates. Rate, review, subscribe while you're at it. Follow, your favorite authors online. Give them a rating and review on Goodreads and on Amazon. It really does help them out. And as always, thank you guys so much for listening.